how worlds like how leagues running in model A and model B looks like. Starting with model A, understand that uh, teams in model A, the investors that are present in most leagues in the world are not like their investment depends on how much these the investment of team depends upon how much these teams are ready to invest, which is to say that these team having multiple owners who have different willingness to invest and different capacity to invest, which means that among these teams there is disproportionate access of wealth, which means that not all teams like IPL where all of them start with 100 crore purse. This is not what happens in most leagues in this world, right? Which means then that your capacity to pay determines which players you can buy, which looks like if I have more money in my bag, then I have more likeliness to say get access to better players because I can sign them faster, because I can pay them more and I can pay them faster, right? What happens is when you go ahead and do this, you are more likely in the beginning of the league, the team that has a bigger purse is more likely to buy better players and then is more likely to say go ahead and do better in league, right? Not saying that the richest the team with the richest bag wins the league, but one of the team which has the richer sides of bag gets to win the league, right? What happens is that this creates a vicious cycle of you winning big, you getting more fan base, more fans coming to watch your matches, and more money in your bag. What this essentially does on their side of the house is this creates legacy teams like say Real Madrid, etc. Right? Why is that bad, or why on a comparative that does not happen on our side of the house? Right? In Model B, what you are essentially doing is you are giving these weaker performing teams a chance to go ahead and give them the first opportunity to bag better players in the next season, which prevents the formation of these legacy teams. Insofar, now more teams have access to better players. POI later, right? But what this essentially does is there is flux of new players. There is flux of good players, renowned players in all the teams every year, which means that there is less predictability about which team is going to win, which is simply because now there are no legacy teams, which means in leagues like NBA you do not see if Lakers is winning this year, that does not mean that Laker is also going to win for the next 6 years, which means that in every season anything can happen, which means there is less predictability and more excitement within the fans, which means that now competition in these leagues is not just dependent upon the big players, or there are no such legacy teams to begin with, which means that the opportunity for new players is also more of which later in my speech, right? But then moving on to the stakeholders in this debate, there are three primary stakeholders in this debate, most important of them being the fans of these fans or viewership that these leagues have, second most important stakeholders being newer players, and thirdly these leagues as a whole, right? But why are fans such an important stakeholders in this debate, right? So since insofar like we are living in a capitalistic society where we are say going ahead and most people are leading a boring 9 to 5 life which they do not want to subscribe to begin with. They look for entertainment and cathartic value in sports, which means that they come late from office, and for some degree of enjoyment and cathartic value they look forward to sports. But also understand how these fans are classified or how these fans are located, right? These teams in these leagues represent localized regions, which means that they have localized fans, which means I as a resident of Delhi am more likely to support Delhi capital simply because I live in Delhi, right? Which means then that why, which also then leads us to why is the winning or losing of a particular team really bad for these fans, right? Insofar my team continuously loses, it reduces the cathartic value that then I get out of sports. Insofar I know that my team not having the financial capacity to buy better players and my team losing this time does not get to does not get access to better players or does not get an equal chance to do better in the next season, right? But then also understand how these negative sentiments can be also bad for players, which means that you can see the hate towards players like Hardik Pandya in IPL because of Mumbai Indians losing, but understand on a comparative why that is going to be much worse off on their side of the house, because on their side of the house Mumbai Indians literally does not get to compete with the other 9 teams in the next season. right? At that point in time, hate sentiment towards players exponentially increases on their side of the house, and the cathartic value that then these fans from these localized regions get can also decreases majorly on their side of the house, right? But two major lines of argumentation then. Before that, POI.
A simple clarification. All your model is doing is giving the worst performing team a chance to offer more money to probably the best player. The best player can still say no to for playing for your team, which is bad performing. So prove the effectiveness of your model.
Right, understand that this house prefers a world when first of all no players can say no to an offer, like when when some amount of money is offered to them, but also understand the type of world that grows on our side of the paradigm. In our side of the paradigm, when the norm is different players moving on to say different good players moving on to all the teams, and no legacy teams existing to begin with, insofar we begin with such a model, then new players do not have any such incentives to go ahead and associate themselves only with particular teams, insofar there is no stability in who wins the competition every year. At that point in time, then these big players have no incentive to particularly associate themselves with certain teams and disassociate themselves with certain teams, right? Then two major lines of argumentation. First, viewership. I've told you why this is better for fans, insofar they're getting more cathartic value, more excitement. They're then going to see more matches because there is less predictability in this league, right? Which not only means more entertainment value for the fans, but it also means more revenue for these leagues such as NBA. And so far, more fans are coming to watch matches of more teams instead of just players coming to watch CSK versus MI, etc. Right? But also understand these leagues benefiting as a whole has a trickle down effect on regional teams, such as NBA having a rise of NBA having trickle down effect on regional basketball leagues becoming better. Insofar, like when due to IPL, you will see that Ranji players are playing better than before, and more players are sent to play cricket to begin with, insofar there's more opportunity and there's more access to equal opportunity. But also in terms of opportunity, why is this better for younger players or managers or scouts that recruit them? More about that in our TPL. Proud to propose.
Perfect. Thanking the Prime Minister for that fine speech, calling upon the Leader of Opposition whenever you're ready.
Am I audible?
Loud and clear.
Okay. Now I can't hear him going as leader of opposition. Starting my speech in three, two, one. Cool. I think the Gov has an impact, but they're never able to like give neck for it, right? Their push is that you might all teams might be able to get or like new or like the lower performing teams can get good players. I think it's still the opportunity that you get in this model. It doesn't mean that just because this world starts or this is the dominant model from like beginning does not mean pretty much all players will be okay with going to a bad team, right? I can like give you multiple structural reasons as to why that won't happen. I think first, not more often than not, you probably get more paid. Or if let's say some like lower performing team is like giving you a huge amount of deal, you'd still want to like get a higher deal, right? Now you probably go ahead and quote this figure in order for you to get like more money from your own like team for which you have been playing for so long. So like more often than not, the players will use it as negotiating power to remain in their own team or to get like more money from their own team. Which is secondly, right? I think moving from one team to another is something that's like that most players would not want to, because you have like grown in this team, you have raised all the fan base through this team, you have probably made some of your best friends as like players from that team, right? So you won't necessarily want to like go away from this team to a newer team. That means like there's like multiple things that you'd have to like explore on yourself, or like do like a lot of like new things, or you want to like interact with like newer players, just like so many things. So people in more often than not would not want to move from their own comfort zone, right? So that's why you probably stay in your same team. But at that point, it's still the opportunity that these like teams will get, and I don't think you will be able to actualize on that, or you will be able to completely remove like legacy teams from like dominating the sphere. So what exactly is better and why? And the biggest like problem with Gov is that they're uncomparative, right? What is the comparative? I think or in model A, or like whatever A or B, I don't know, but like the where the relegation is happening, right? Where if the worst performing team has to move down to a like poorer league, right? To a completely different league. I think that's better, because what happens is this: it's not just the worst performing team that goes down a league, but also like the best performing team from the lower league, which also comes up, right? Because you need to have a set number of teams. So if the worst performing team moves down the ladder, then the best performing team from the league behind it will also like come up, right? So what does that mean? I think like newer teams get opportunities to get like traction or to get like recognized in the first place, because the biggest league or the one that gets the highest traction or the one that people follow the most is something that gives you with like multiple benefits, right? Players get much more recognized. You're able to like get much more like sponsorship deals and all those sort of things. So you're able to like fund your team or also like build your team. You can like get like more better equipments or probably train your players in much better ways and all those sort of things. So I think at that point, a team which is like playing in a lower league, which does not get that much attraction or like that much like does not have that much of like follower base, they are able to like get this sort of like opportunity in of itself. I think that is more important. I think this is better, right? Where even if you have like legacy teams, a team that is still in the best league is still somewhere like much more like better, right? Or like is able to like get more funding. So I think just on a scale of vulnerability, we are able to like win this much better, because a team that never really has this opportunity is at least able to get that on our side. But also secondly, right, what exactly would happen? I think they're able to like probably get one or two players in their own side who might get this newer equitable opportunity. I think we are able to like promulgate equality for like throughout all these leagues. That is, I think like people from like different leagues or like teams from different leagues have this opportunity to become better. That's why they are incentivized to play their best so they can get promoted to like the better league, and they're able to like get more funding in of itself. But also, I think why do like teams perform bad, right? They are like probably because the management is being complacent, because they feel that they're able to like make money out of it. They're able to make money out of dealerships and sponsorships. So there's no like necessary need for you to go ahead and give your best in terms of, let's say, playing games. And I think that also happens for like players, right? You don't have to focus a lot in order for you in like playing that game, when they're able to like make multiple side incomes just by their like popularity and fame. I think this sort of like complacency is the reason why like most teams start to underperform in like leagues to a large extent. On our side, if there is always this sort of like deterrence that if you're not playing good, you will be like relegated, and like all your privileges that you're getting in terms of funding will be like lost, or you won't be able to have as much as you used to. That's when you probably start taking it seriously. You don't want to be the worst performing team, and you try to like try to give your best, or probably train your players much more better. Because if you're relegated, like people laugh at the team, or like you become a matter of ridicule, right? So you don't want that to happen, and that's why like most management will try to give their best, or most players will try to give their best in order for like for the best of the team. But also, right, so how does that impact the like audiences? You are able to like get much more competitive matches where like probably every team tries to like give best, like on also, right, even if like you don't have like finals or like semi-finals, probably like a match between the worst performing and second worst performing, which will decide who is going to get relegated. I think even those matches become a point of tension, because both the teams try to give their best in those matches. And I think that's where you're able to like increase traction. So in the end, it's the audience are able to get more interesting matches to go ahead and like see in a particular league, right? So what are our impacts, right? So in the end, you're able to like ensure that there's like more equity for like players, for teams, like regardless of like all leagues in and of itself, and I'm able to tell you how like audiences are able to like get better matches. Before moving on, any POI?
Yes, simple question. In your world, when a team moves down, what does happen to the team and the fan base involved with it?
Fair, right? I think uh, that probably like incentivizes them, right? Their fan base would probably like dilute that, that a team got relegated that they were supporting for so long. But also, right, they want to go back to this. There's always a positive incentive loop here, because once you're in this best league, you're able to like get the most like funding, or like get the most amount of like viewer sponsorship and like more viewership. So you want that. That's where you start to like perform better, or try to give your best so that you can get promoted the next year. You try to perform the best in that remaining league, but in that lower league, right? And also ancillary impact of it, right? Either you the people who are like supporting you for so long will still try to like support you. At least some base of them will still support you. I think that's when you're able to like probably create some traction for even those lower leagues, right? Because now the entire fan base of that popular team in that league is also going ahead and watching the matches of that lower league. So you're able to like increase or like divert like viewership in of itself for like different leagues overall, which means there's like more like traction that they can get for other teams that are playing in that same league. So you're able to like make or like all leagues popular. All leagues are becoming like or like all leagues at least get some amount of traction on our side. With that, very proud to propose.
Perfect. Thanking Elo for that fine speech, calling upon Deputy Prime Minister. Whenever you're ready.
Perfect. Give me like 5 seconds. Am I audible? Just confirm me that.
Loud and clear.
Perfect. Perfect. POIs after 5 minutes. Do not put it in the chat. Generally, do not write anything in the chat. Unmute yourself. Say POI. If I tell you not to, just know what not to do. I'll take it after 5 minutes. 5:30 to genuinely unmute kar lena, please. Sorry. Yeah. Preferred pronouns he/him. Vibhor Jain going for DPM, starting in 3, 2, 1, start. 5 things I'll do for you in this debate. First, I'll tell you the incentive for players to keep on, like, still sign up for teams. Second, how does this draft movement look like? Third, how does this movement of teams in their world looks like? Fourth, how this lower league viewership is absolute bullshit. Five, the performance incentive associated with managers not being complacent. Let's talk about the incentive that exists for players for just like going ahead and like joining even bullshit teams to start with. Understand this. It's easier for me to rise up as a player if I'm not playing with Virat Kohli, because Virat Kohli will definitely score a 50 or a century. But even if I make 30 runs in a team which is bad, I'm someone who's recognized for that particular team and I have a local fan base who starts supporting me more. This looks like that if I'm an NBA player and I'm probably getting drafted in Lakers, Kobe Bryant or LeBron James never passes to me because they feel that they're better players than me. But I get more opportunity to shine and play, and I'm not just a substitute or reserve player in a team which is relatively lower. That is an active incentive for individuals to go ahead and sign up for new teams. Second idea, there's high value because there's a scope of improvement is high. Understand that these lower teams in draft system work because they were never able to make the playoffs. These 14 teams who never make the playoffs get the first pick in a reverse worst order, right? At that point, because there's a scope of improvement existing, which means that if I make this team get to playoffs with the new recruits, these new recruits get popularized very fast. This sort of active reward which is available to them ensures that the risk reward ratio for them becomes positive in nature, because either the option for them is that they never get to go ahead and engage in a team like LA Lakers, because obviously LeBron James is going to be the first player who gets stepped up to play, or Stephen Curry plays first over a university level player. Let's talk about the second idea in terms of draft. First of all, draft works for new players and there is hardly any inter-team movement. You never see LeBron James getting removed from like LA Lakers or Cleveland Cavaliers, because it happens like in 5 to 6 years because their contracts are extremely long. At that particular point of time, these new players who come out of colleges and universities are the ones who get signed up for draft, and that is literally how NBA or NFL works. And that is something which you need to know, right? Understand how these lottery systems work. That you have these lottery systems in which the odds in the lottery are placed in a negative fashion, which means the worst team has higher odds to get the first pick, which means that as soon as I get my first pick, that player has to go ahead and sign up for that contract. There is no option given to that particular player in regards to whether you want to go ahead and work for that team or not. It's just dependent upon that particular individual's performance, because these players from college and university level are already very happy just to be fucking playing for NBA, if not for anything else, and they're really glad to go ahead and do that particular idea, right? At this point, there's hardly any inter-team movement, so their comfort zone space is bullshit. But let's talk about the how like the further draft movement sort of improves the sort of idea, right? Insofar as a younger player, I'm more likely to get picked by anyways by lower teams. The problem is that if like higher teams or better teams have an option to go ahead and incentivize these players, because of money capital they have, these players will never be, these players are gonna get like in way longer contracts. These players are never given the opportunity for like lower teams to sign these players and improve their sort of team, right? Because of the existence of like infrastructure facilities that these higher teams are able to provide, luxury taxes, the sort of chartered planes that these people have for transporting their players, the sort of life that they promise is something which decreases the accessibility of teams who do not have enough revenue to be able to compete. This happened on two fronts. A, if the team loses, but B, if the team's popularity is less, which means that a team from New York City or Los Angeles is anyways going to be more famous than a team from Cleveland, because of the sheer disparity among the population that exists in these paradigms. This is something which is not reliant upon the players playing in this sort of fashion, but is reliant directly due to the revenue that is collected because of the extreme amount of local disparity in geographical locations according to population and the incentive that these individuals have for viewership. At that point, it becomes extremely more important for allowing these teams to over surpass this sort of population bias and ensure that they're able to ensure they get a better pick in the next season and just not get demoted into a relegated league because of sheer fact that, you know what, you had less population, so less viewership, so less money, so you could not attract teams. But let's talk about the movement of teams in their parents. There are two sort of movements that can happen: a higher movement from a lower league to an upper league, or a lower movement from an upper league to a lower league. The problem with moving from down from a lower league, very bullshit for them to say that, you know what, you have more incentive to go back. You have to prove to me the capacity to go back. You do not have the capacity to go back because you do not have the marquee players that were associated. You lack the competition now because the lower leagues have lesser competition, so the scope of improvement for your players in an ego battle while competing is extremely low. Because if I'm competing with Virat Kohli, I probably want to score like Virat Kohli. But if I'm competing in the Ranji Trophy, I probably want to go ahead and limit my standards to the Ranji Trophy players, because that is when I'm in the competitive environment and I care about winning the match as my priority. If I win the match, there's a cathartic release which ensures that I do not go ahead and keep on improving in that particular idea. But second problem, if I go lower and a new player was signed for this team, it looks literally Hardik Pandya being a legacy player getting insane amount of slurs because he was not able to get Mumbai Indians like in the playoffs. Understand, if Mumbai Indians was not allowed to play in IPL next year, the sort of bullshit will come on Hardik Pandya on Twitter and shit like that. And the sort of hatred is extremely bad for younger players because these people have not established their fan base who's come for their support. At that point, this becomes extremely depressive as a tendency for these lower players. But let's talk about the higher moving teams, right? If I'm in the League B, which looks like if I'm in IPL B, let's say, for me to move higher to IPL A, I need extreme amount of funds to be able to compete with the team. Otherwise, I'm just gonna get screwed up and bullied by them in the new IPL format, right? You never prove to me why these players, anyways, will be able to have marquee players who are able to generate enough revenue for them to be able to compete in an eventful manner in these teams and be able to generate enough viewership. Because understand, people watch matches where they get excitement, either on the quality of sports or B on the localized access or on like the interest of them due to these marquee players. Because I will definitely watch a match where Messi is playing, but I will definitely not watch a match which Atletico Madrid is playing probably. At this point of time, because of this higher movement, you still are not able to ensure revenue, which means you'll probably fall back down in the lower league the next year and again continue the sort of vicious cycle for hate coming towards your players. But let's go to the fourth idea about lower league viewership. They're never able to prove to you why lower leagues will anyways get viewership
POI.
if teams move down. Teams moving down means that I have more hatred towards this team existing in the entire domain space. Right? At this point, when I have more hatred towards the team, I'm more likely to watch the teams who are playing above because I feel they're better off and I'm more likely to be a loyal fan towards them instead of teams that are moving bad. POI, go.
What is the criteria for a player from a lower league to get selected into a higher league on your side?
Perfect. The idea is very simple. You play extremely well. It's something very simple. You play extremely good in Ranji Trophy. Those fixtures of yours are promoted in the auction. People see those fixtures that are existing. People bid on you. Very simple. You play really good in university leagues or leagues which are under NBA. You do that. You're promoted to NBA just because the sheer fact that LA Lakers will now want you, or Bucks will now want you, or Cavaliers will now want you. But understand, lower league viewership is absolute bullshit. I tell you from the very get-go, because people are less incentivized to watch like lower quality of sports in general, and the lower quality of sports ensures that they're not willing to watch it because of the lack of market, etc. Let's what performance incentive. No fucking manager in this world wants to go ahead and make sure that their team loses, and they're not complacent about it because their entire salary and their contract also depends upon this team's existence and winning. Which means that this fan base that exists for these, so the revenue which exists for these teams is not just reliant upon them winning, but also on the sales of tickets, but also on the sales of merchandise, but also on the sales of existing like the sort of advertisement quality that they're able to generate, which means that these managers are incentivized to go ahead and increase their business operations, which means they're not going to get complacent because they need their players to start shining out and shining brighter, because a shining brighter player will get more branding deals, which ensures these managers have a longer payroll and a longer revenue generation, which is ensuring them a better sort of paycheck for their life. Very, very proud to propose. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thanking the DPM for that fine speech, calling upon the DLO whenever you're ready.
Hi, I'm clear. Am I clearly audible?
Yep, loud and clear.
Cool, Aditya. Hey, him going as DLO. POI is via chat. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Just like two clarifications, and then our positive case will directly clash with them. Firstly, draft system also remains on our side of the house because teams need new players, which means the only delta here is that you probably do not give an advantageous position to the worst performing team on our side, but that does not mean that the legacy teams or even the worst performing team does not go ahead and get new players regularly every league on our side of the house. Which means everything which was the answer to my POI, that is, if you perform really, really well in Ranji Trophy, you will get selected for IPL and you'll get selected for national cricket team, is something which is symmetrically happening on our side as well. Which means, what is the delta here? There are entire teams who are getting like promoted to a higher system on our side of the house. Why it, like promoting an entire team instead of just selecting a few players is very important, specifically for the reasons which their prime minister countered, that prove why some people who have more resources, because they can buy higher equipment, because they can get under better coaches, because they have legacy money, can go ahead and be better players in general because of the extra wealth which they have. Which means on their side, when only specific players are handpicked and promoted to a higher league, these players are likely to come from affluent backgrounds with proper, like with more money and with more coaching and with more equipment and more and better equipment and more support in general. Probably corruption also exists and things like that. The direct implication of this is that because of the impact of wealth on the performance and on selection, which their prime minister beautifully characterizes, the most important harm on their side of the house is that a player who is coming from a bad background or poor, like weak background on their side of the house and playing in a like Ranji Trophy or playing in a lower league never get a chance to go ahead and be promoted to a higher league at all on their side of the house. They have to take this trade-off. The direct impact of this is that on our side, when entire teams are going ahead and being promoted, and I'll also to tell you why more like importance is given to lower level leagues on our side of the house, which means on scale, more players get more funding, more sponsors, and more fan base, which therefore allows more player to opt in into lower league or opt in into sport in the first place. But also, secondly, it allows them a platform to go ahead and improve their skills so that more people in general have chance to get promoted at a lower at the faster level. But the second I want to note is on the metric of like Hardik Pandya getting hit. There are two answers to this. The first response is that, just like they say, this is a THP, a world motion, which means this system starts from the beginning, which means it's unclear why players have such a huge fan base and huge fan following, particularly those players who are worst performing in the worst performing team on their side of the house, regardless. Which means if I don't have a fan following, who is there for me to hate in the first place? But also, secondly, they also talk about that popularity and fan base is proportional to your performance anyway, which means Lakers probably have a huge performance, and because LeBron James probably have a huge like fan base. The direct implication of this, it's unclear why LeBron James suddenly goes from being the best player to the worst player the next year and does not like and comes at the like bottom most of the league. We are not talking about getting qualified like to playoffs and shit like that. We are talking about being the bottom most in the whole fucking league and you being the sole cause of that bottom most performance. If that is the case, it's unclear why these players have any fan base or like have significant fan base right now, and why these players then suddenly get so much hate on our side of the house. What's our positive case then? Two things. Firstly, we in terms of giving opportunities at all levels, we concede the trade-off that on their side of the house, probably you will have more accessibility and equity at the top tier. Problem is this tier, this more like opportunity to new players and better players to play in National League gets restricted to a top tier in their side of the house. Why does it trickle down only on our side of the house? Because, as they say, fans are capitalist. They want more engaging performance. They don't want to see scripted matches. They want to see a match with real stakes, with real thrill. What is the stake at Ranji Trophy? Nothing. Because you can play for 20 years in Ranji Trophy and never get selected in the higher league. That changes immediately on our side of the house because now in every season in Ranji Trophy, a player will go ahead and be promoted. Like a complete team will go ahead and be promoted to a higher league. This is crucial because the higher stakes has three impacts. Firstly, now more players ground level opt into the sport because they see players like getting rapid upward mobility. They don't see players stuck for playing for Railways for 15 years, they see their local boy going ahead and playing in Ranji Trophy and then moving on to like IPL and national cricket team in 2 or 3 years at best. Which means there are more interest in sport because it's seen as a lucrative career, which means more people join sport in the first place. The second immediate impact which comes out of this is that is again according to their MEC. Right now, how many IPL teams are there? 10, which means 10 local areas which are representing. When just take this intuition pump. When Lucknow Super Giants and Gujarat Titans joined IPL, there was a huge surge of popularity because the newer areas got represented. But not only that, newer players got from newer areas got represented. Which means on our side of the house, when you increase the representation to a newer team which wasn't earlier represented, it's a direct increase from fan bases from that particular local area according to their which means you get more local popularity on our side. POI, go ahead.
Simple question. Insofar as you promote RCB and then bring Gujarat Titans, your fan base disproportionate effect still same
Yes, but
engage.
the RCB has the highest and significant base anyway because this is a THP award. RCB hasn't been there for 13 years. With that, on our side of the house, you get a new team with local support, which is extremely crucial. But thirdly, now because there's direct stakes involved in Ranji Trophy, more and more companies are willing to give more and more funds into this. We are not talking about Ambani sponsoring Ranji Trophy. We are talking about local companies who are now willing to invest in this sport because now they have a direct incentive that if my team and if my player goes ahead and get promoted to a higher level, then my brand will be publicized at the national level. This incentive is again unlocked exclusively on our side when we increase the stakes at the local level. All of this proves is that by increased funding, increased fan base, and increased opt-in, we get more higher quality of sports in general, which is there meant for proving why fans watch cricket or why fans watch football. Which means we get benefits for fans as well for who are ready to play the sport at a local level. But the direct impact on players is that they are able to get more and better equipment even if they are coming from poor backgrounds because now companies are pouring more funds into this particular local level, lower level sports. But also they are able to share dressing room with higher players, are able to learn from them, are able to play competitively because now Virat Kohli is now also being relegated at Ranji Trophy level, and therefore for all these reasons we get more opportunities to people in general. Very proud to oppose.
Perfect. Thanking the Deputy Leader of Opposition for that fine speech, calling upon the government. Whenever you're ready.
Yes, I'll be starting in 15 seconds. Yeah. Hello, am I audible?
Yep, loud and clear.
Cool. Okay, I'll start my speech. Yeah, for POI, please do not vocalize or raise your hand. Just write it in the chat. I'll take one if I can. Uh, cool. I'll start my speech on a self count of three, two, one. Panel, understand. All their impacts, they draw no impacts from the impacts from the impact of relegation that is clearly mentioned in the motion. All their impacts that necessarily stand in this debate right now are from the idea of promotion, right? And it'll prove to you as to why promotion is much better off in our paradigm than theirs, and therefore none of their impacts necessarily stand. Right, the wild claim that they make, and supposedly make it on the basis of our correct, is that wealthy players are the only players that are promoted, and therefore only top tier players do better off in our world. Understand, panel, that the correct that we've clearly mentioned in our first speech is the idea of wealthy teams doing better off in these leagues, which is a fact, right? At that point of time, then we have clearly mentioned to you in our second speech that these teams that even are promoted from the lower leagues to these upper premier leagues are not necessarily going to do so well in these upper premier leagues, right? And at that point of time, then all their impacts in terms of these players being better off and therefore traction for the sport, etc., etc., necessarily fall. Why is that true, right? Understand, panel, we have talked about wealthy teams in the first speech simply because these wealthy teams want to get more wealthier, right? Where do they get these wealth from? We get this wealth from merchandise, etc., right? Where does this merchandise, etc., necessarily sell off, right? These merchandise, etc., sells off when you have good players, right? And these good players, and therefore the only metric that they have to necessarily go ahead and buy players is the idea of whether or not they play good, right? And therefore wealthy players necessarily do not have higher likelihood of getting selected, but good players necessarily have a high likelihood of getting selected, right? At that point of time, then player selection from these lower leagues is necessarily symmetric in both the paradigms, and therefore this idea of funding coming into these lower leagues, etc., etc., is largely symmetric because even in our paradigm, the sponsors know that their players can still go ahead and play in these particular premier leagues, and therefore good players still get funding from these local companies in our paradigm as well, right? And therefore I do not see any exclusive impacts whatsoever on their end of the spectrum, right? But most importantly, even if we go ahead and buy their claim that you're going to promote this entire team to the top league, right? Understand, we have clearly mechanized and we have clearly characterized to you as to why this particular team is likely to fail in this higher league, right? Why is that true? This higher league necessarily have teams that are wealthy, right? And this particular team that is newly being promoted do not have viewership, does not have wealth, right? Why is it likely to fail then? Is firstly, it does not have wealth and therefore it cannot keep up with the practice, etc., that is required in these particular premier leagues. But then secondly, there are two important incentives for people to watch sports, right? First, competition. Secondly, attachment to team, right? This particular newer team does not pose any competition for its particular for any other teams present in the premier league, and therefore there's not going to be any viewership. But secondly, attachment to team is something that does not necessarily exist in right now for this particular team to begin with, right? But then secondly, the idea of the idea of accessibility, etc., that they harp on about. Understand, panel, this house prefers motion. They have clearly conceded to our characterization of accessibility being highly disparate in their side of the world, right? In our side of the world, right from time t equals 0, we are actually solving the accessibility problem by making accessibility much more equitable, right? They have clearly bought our carac of how wealthy teams do better off and stuff like that. At that point of time, then to tip this particular accessibility also in the favor of these worse off teams per se, we are actually better off because this accessibility is better off right from the beginning, and therefore legacy teams, etc., do not pop in, right? Because legacy teams, etc., do not pop in our side of the world, what happens is there's better competition, there's much more uncertainty of who is going to win this particular league, etc., and therefore because of this better competition, viewership, etc., is better off, right? But I think there are other claims that are clearly washed off, right? One thing that they have mostly talked about and harped on about is the idea that yet good players are necessarily not going to choose to go into your teams, right? Firstly, this particular rebuttal is largely net negative and mitigatory at best, right? But I think we have given you clear reasoning as to why this is not going to be the case, right? We have talked to you about the incentives for these players in terms of outshining other players in these newer teams, of higher higher potential for improvement of these teams, right? And then thirdly, the idea of these legacy teams not existing, and lastly, drafts mostly being for newer players, etc., etc. At that point in time, because of all these reasons, I believe that these good players we have given you clear reasoning as to why these good players have a lot of incentives to go ahead join these particular newer weaker teams as well, right? And therefore I think competition, etc., will be better off on our side of the paradigm as well, right? And lastly, there are quite outrageous claim in terms of management being complacent. Understand, panel, there's a large and outrageous case of problem solution mismatch on the paradigm of the side opposition, right? We have clearly told to you right from our first speech that the problem with these weaker teams is the lack of accessibility, right? The problem with these weaker teams is the lack of population, like in the case of Cleveland, right? At that point of time, then this is the problem that you are solving by providing you much more equitable accessibility on our side of the paradigm, right? On our side of the paradigm, whereas in their side of the paradigm, the problem that they identify is that management is not complacent. Understand why on the likelihood metric this necessarily falls off, right? On a likelihood metric, we have clearly proven to you how there are incentives for this management to not slack off, how there are incentives for this management to not be complacent, etc., right? Yes, POI.
How many middle class parents allow their child to have sports as a permanent career?
Yeah, understand panel. The idea of more people going ahead and joining sports, etc., is something that is going to be largely symmetric. People do not let their children to go ahead and join sports, etc., because they believe that sports is something that does not fetch you money, right? The idea of how sports gets you money is something that is beyond the imagination of middle class. I'm not going to engage with it further, but I've clearly proven to you as to why players are getting promoted equally likely in both the paradigms. If they want something good for the team management per se, then that I do not believe as to why those are the most important stakeholder in this particular debate, right? Now, at this point of time, then what stands in both the worlds at this point of time, right? In their world, the exclusive harms that exist are clearly this, right? They are firstly ripping away the right for these particular people and fan bases from the geographical locations that lobby around this verse of team, right? That are going to exist, like in case of RCB in IPL, etc. Right? At that point of time, then these particular fans are let down. These particular fans now cannot necessarily actively take part in this particular Premier League, etc. Right? Secondly, negative impacts on players is something that is exclusive on their world, right? Where necessarily these particular fans are now going to blame these players. There's lots of viewership that exclusively exists in their world, and there's no scope for improvement, because we have clearly proven to you in our first speech that for improvement you require competition, etc., that exists in the Premier League. And we've already proven to you that the problem with these teams not succeeding was the idea of accessibility, etc., that we are providing these teams in our world. And I think we are much better off for the sport and for the teams and for the players. Very, very proud to propose.
Perfect. Uh, Thanking the topic for that fine speech, calling upon Octave to wrap up the substantive house.
30 seconds.
Your voice is a little muffled, so maybe when you're ready to speak, just try to say a sentence or so. Octave?
Yeah. Am I clearly audible? Am I audible?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay. I, Tanya, going as the opposition whip, will start my speech on the self count of three, two, one. Exclusively on our side, even legacy team are now afraid of demotion. That is to say, they have all the incentives in the world to go ahead, spend money, efforts, and resources to ensure that the players in the team are of good quality. That is to say, even if legacy players like Rohit Sharma, etc., are now performing bad, they have all the incentives to go ahead and remove him from the team. That is to say, demotion is even worse, and that is why they have all the and you already concede to the fact that these kind of teams have more money, etc., which means they have the incentive to now go ahead and invest money in training of players who are extremely good in nature. And that is to say, because upward career mobility exclusively increases on our side, that is why these new players who you want to benefit on your side exclusively are benefited on our side, because these legacy teams also care about good performing players in general, because they are afraid of demotion. But secondly, these new players also get more support on our side from local sponsors, as they know that there are chances of promotion. So that is why your case is based so that is why there are exclusive harms on your side, starting with firstly even good teams in these national tournament, in these legacy tournaments, even they have lower stakes of performing to the best of their capability because there are no stakes. That is to say, even if you perform bad, you will get good players when the drafting system comes. And that is why, because psychologically, players and humans perform well when the stakes are extremely high, or they give their best when stakes are high. On your side, because there are no stakes, which means there is no chance of them getting demoted, they are not going to perform to the best of their capabilities in this tournament. That is why on our side, even for these legacy tournaments, we ensure the quality of the tournament itself. That is to say, these elite leagues have best team, only best team remains in these legacy teams on our side. That is why viewership is guaranteed improve on our side, because the good quality of players in general is guaranteed on our side of the house. But secondly, on your side, even the kind of equity and competitive balance you talk about is restricted to only these more elite tournaments, and you concede to this fact. Because what do you say? Listen carefully. They said that these players in lower tournaments, they are bad, they do not have the fans, and nobody watches them. All of this also proves that even competitive balance you talk about on your side will be restricted to these more elite tournaments, and draft systems is concentrated to these major leagues. You prove this when you concede to all of these facts of nobody watches lower tournaments. And that is why there are these exclusive benefits of model on our side. You increase the visibility and traction of lower leagues, as now you can move upwards. That is to say, there will be more funding, and because now there is meritocracy in and of itself, and there is performance linked reward. That is to say, if a team, even if the players are not well known or not have fan base, even if they perform good, they will move upward. And that is why more sponsors are willing to invest in these kind of lower level tournaments also. And there is an increased deterrence on our side. More and more teams have the incentive to go ahead and have good players, new players who are really good. They get easily selected, and their legacy doesn't matter. But you talk a lot about wealth. Firstly, lot of teams in entering these kind of elite leagues more or less are equally economically well off anyways. That is to say, the kind of wealth disparity you talk about, which exists within these elite tournament, is non-existent in the first place, because all of these teams are very elite, and that is why wealth as the criteria for performance doesn't matter. But you have to understand that on your side, revenue is disproportionately given to these bigger leagues only, and there is this problem of frequent team changing on your side, which happens due to the draft system. Because even if you have the best player in the world on your side with a bad performing team in general, the problem is they may not sync together, or maybe their internal management is bad, etc. And that is why team building takes a lot of time and efforts, right? And that is why you are unsure of the dynamics working within the team itself when you have a very extremely good player who has no right on your side to opt out with these bad performing players in general. And that is why two people are better on our side: fans in and of itself and newer players. Understand what these sports are. There are grown-up humans playing with the ball. It doesn't make sense to be invested. But why are fans still watching these sports? Because they're emotionally invested. Firstly, more fans are attached to the teams and not the league. That is to say, if your favorite teams get demoted, now you're gonna watch these lower tournaments, because these leagues are not what matter to you as a fan. These teams matter, and that is why, as in of itself, you're loyal to the team. These fan clubs of these teams are gonna be emotionally invested, and that is why they are going to watch these lower tournaments. We increase the visibility and traction. After that, understand why do fans watch it? Because there is this dopamine which comes, there is this increased excitement, but it increases on our side because now the stakes are very high. You're not stagnant, and there is movement both upper and lower happening. More and more teams are going upwards, and bad performing teams may go downward. This creates this craze and excitement, and that is why there are more and more topics to talk about. That is to say, these fan clubs for teams exist, etc. And that is why they do not care about the league in and of itself, which means all of the kind of different leagues which exist get more and more traction on our side of the house. And that is why even if they hate that their team got demoted, they still are not going to opt out and still be engaged. And that is why more and more people have the incentive to watch these lower leagues. And that is why when the stakes of the matches are very high, not only it increases the motivation of the player to perform well, but it yeah, POI.
Simple question. Prove to me the extent of difference that arises out of creating your deterrence for the sports player to perform better in comparison to the sports player exceeding and getting injured by them because they are scared of the Twitter hate.
The fans, see, most of careers around sports are extremely linked to viewership, your fan base, and that is what brings money to these kind of institutions. And that is why when the stakes are high and more and more people have the willingness to watch these matches, because now even bad matches or lower level matches have the opportunity of extremely flipping what comes next. And that is why this kind of craze and this kind of uncertainty builds. And that is why in and of itself we firstly ensure that these tournaments are they have higher quality, but secondly all the matches are high stakes in general. And that is why you have to understand that this is a THP world's motion. And that is why on our side, if you're performing good, you will you're because we have a system of meritocracy and everything is performance linked, your legacy will not determine your future, or how much wealth you hold. And that is why on our side in general newer players and the fan engagement increases. With that, proud to oppose.
Perfect. Thanking the operator for the fine speech, calling upon operator to begin the replies.
Hi, assuming I'm clearly audible.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Aditya went as DLO, going as Optify. Starting in 3, 2, 1. When a lot of discussion has happened, start. A lot of discussion has happened on our model in this debate. But just check your notes on what all the positive exclusive benefits have they given for their model. The two benefits, like the just one benefit which they have given, is that we have more equity because now better university level players are going to New York City instead of say Lakers. I don't know which is better, but like just get the idea. Are going to a weaker team instead of good team. So now the problem is LeBron James was already in Lakers, which means a good player was already there in a good team. That is why they came first and you came last in the first place. Now you are expecting the quality of sports to dramatically increase. You are expecting fan following to dramatically increase. You are expecting the standings to dramatically change just because a few good players got the chance to play for the worst fucking team possible. Why are they worst? Probably they do not have a good management. Probably they do not have coaching. Probably they do not have thinking. Whatever the reason, whatever the impact of this, their model is a highly speculative one. But the biggest harm of their model is that it has no trickle down whatsoever to the league or the president. The top leagues are also playing in the lower leagues, and they do not have a single exclusive mechanism to benefit these 500 players who are a more in number, but also b more in like more important in vulnerability. Clearly audible. Can you please pause it, timer? Wait, chair, confirm the paper, please.
Yeah, you're audible.
Since the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Cool, no issue. Uh, हाँ, on set, ठीक है. Resuming in 3, 2, 1, which means catering to low leagues, these players are more vulnerable, plus also B, these players are more people enter sports, which means not catering to these local level leagues is directly harming the sport as a whole because new players don't even want to enter in a stagnant Ranji league on their side of the house. There's no mechanism at all on their side to prove it. The mechanism is drafting system that and harms of our model has like the harms. Let's talk about the harms which they foresee. The first thing which they say is people will hate. Who are these people? Why were they following the worst performing team? According to their their mech, these teams have lower population, come from lower population area. So presumably, the number of fans they have also lower, which means the extent of hate or increase or something which is speculative, because right now they are for being the worst. Why do you hate more? Do you extra hate you have on our side of the house? They never impact this. The second thing I wanted to prove is that they say legacy teams exist on our side of the house. Well, that's symmetric because presumably more population exists in even on their side, so more more wealthier investors even on their side, which means some teams have more money, draft better players. It's unclear why legacy teams suddenly change on their side of the house. You just shift some better university player to worst performing team. That does not so the team still have the highest money possible. But last tell you if sports improve because you have more equity. We flip this argument and claim it as our benefit because we have an entire new team who is now playing in top league, which means there is more excitement, more curiosity to see how Lucknow is performing or how Gujarat is performing, and but also because the stakes are higher, fans are even more engaged because the worst fucking team will be completely eliminated, which means there is more competitiveness in general. So quality of sports improve. The exclusive benefits is very, very simple. We give you more funding, more traction, more visibility at the lower league, for the lower league and for the lower poor people for like who are joining the sport, because now upward career mobility is faster, and therefore this is exclusively happening when stakes are increased at lower level. For all these reasons, proud to oppose.
Perfect. Thanking the Occupy for that fine speech, calling upon the Occupy to wrap up the debate.
Starting in, assuming I'm audible, just confirm it once, Jimmy. Thank you so much. Starting in 3, 2, 1, I'll just point out inexclusive shit in this debate. First, upward movement out of like meritocracy, whatever bullshit the whip starts to say. Simple idea, upward movement happens in both of our cases. The difference is whether the movement is the team as a whole or individual players. It's obviously easier for an individual player to shine higher and like move faster. They never tell you the likelihood of that movement in support. We tell you that the player can move higher because it's his own personal records, which is less reliant upon the entire team's functioning, which means if I score a century, I am good to go. My fixtures are shown. That is literally the analysis I give to you in my DPM. The team overall has to function to move up in their world. They could lose and they could still be really bad. And that really bad is again dependent upon their geographical sentiments. Again, geographical disparities seep into their world. But second idea, revenue is disproportionate leagues. It's gonna still be the same. I never understand how they're claiming that the upper leagues and the lower leagues are gonna have like symmetric sort of viewership in their paradigm. The upper league is upper league for a reason. It probably has Messi playing in it versus Messi Junior playing in lower league. At that point, I'm pretty sure Messi is seen more in the world. But in contrast, our teams have more revenue in totality. Why? The exclusive benefit that you provide to you is less predictability in nature, which means the world will not just keep on watching FC Barcelona or Real Madrid playing, but they'll also watch other teams because the sheer fucking fact that every year a new draft happens, worse teams get better players, scope of them winning increases, which means I want to watch a team which can win. Simple as that. People want to watch teams which win. At that point, revenue increases because the engagement with number of matches increases. That is what we've been telling you from the very start. This literally looks like in NBA, there are 7 to 8 fucking teams which can win at any point of time, which includes Bucks, Cavaliers, LA Lakers, Golden State Warriors, or Mavericks. In FIFA or in like La Liga, FC Barcelona, Real Madrid, or at best at times Atletico Madrid starts to play up. And at that time, this is something which we give to you exclusively. But understand the second idea: young players, very problematic. Young players in our world get opportunity to shine because they go to a verse of team which they can take up. They can set up their own legacy framework. They do not need to be with Kobe Bryant, who will never pass them the fucking ball. Or they do not need to be reliant upon a bad team League B to make them transcend to a upper league. They can individualistically improve themselves and their skills and get an opportunity. This opportunity then translates to lower leagues becoming better, more people getting involved, higher viewership, higher revenue making incentive for parents to send their fucking kids to start playing sports because sports are seen as a lucrative offer now. Every sort of this bullshit just comes from us. Nothing engagement also coming from offside. They just start to refute these claims on the face value of them. Let's understand both the worlds and how they look, because that is extremely important in this debate right now. I'm a college student. I play extremely good basketball. I get signed up in a team of, let's say, MIT Basketball Warriors. At that particular point of time, I have a dream to play in NBA. I am reliant upon MIT Basketball Warriors to be able to win tomorrow, so that I am able to go ahead and play in NBA in their world. And I'm only reliant upon me being able to score a basket today to be able to play in NBA tomorrow. Which is more likely? That is what you have to ask right now. Second, talk about fans. I'm a fan of Mumbai Indians right now. Mumbai Indians get thrown out of IPL. I don't care if Hardik Pandya is a legacy player or not. There could be 11 new fresh faces coming right out of DU right now, playing for like Delhi Capitals, and Delhi could get screwed up in IPL. I will hate all 11 of those players because they fucking made my team lose and fucking made me less proud of the city I live in. At that point, that sort of emotional attachment I have, which gets delegated on the fucking players who are gonna go ahead and play, who are just coming out of their colleges or who are new faces, is extremely problematic, and that is way more extremely problematic for players who have never developed a legacy. And Jha claims this in his speech. They never are able to develop a legacy because it's not nothing like Hardik Pandya right now. They're all fresh faces. They do not have a support structure which defends them. It's not like Shami having haters and supporters both existing on Twitter. It's just haters now because supporters are never able to get built because they're constantly losing. At that particular point of time, I do not understand any sort of benefit that they give to fans apart from saying that, you know what, Gujarat Titans came in. IPL, Gujarat Titans came in because two teams had to resign because of bullshit charges. That's a very bad parallel to draw, and not something which can be considered in this debate as relevant. You have to prove relevance of the examples you give. Very, very proud to prove this.
Perfect. Thanking all the speakers for a wonderful debate. Yeah, we'll see you in a bit in the auditorium with the results. And yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you for the break.
Just to be
Yeah,
clear,
Praval,
I,
we'll fill in the draw. Yeah, 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 you can leave.